Vanya has always struggled to meet expectations and achieve success. Since their childhood, Marina and Vanya lived next to each other, and Vanya would silently carry Marina's briefcase to and from school, making her laugh with his lack of words. As the years went by, Marina would tease Vanya about his silence, but he remained quiet, only sniffing louder when she started dating someone. Vanya's mother would sigh, wishing he would find a good partner, but Vanya continued to accompany Marina, even when she pushed him away. Vanya would assure her that those guys were no good for her. Marina would often get frustrated with Vanya, but he would take it in stride. Eventually, Vanya was drafted into the army, where he tried to keep himself occupied and forget about Marina. He spent his free time in the gym, and when he returned, he was incredibly handsome. Many girls noticed him, but his only desire was to see Marina. Meanwhile, Marina herself had a suspicion that she might be pregnant. Without much thought, she seduced Vanya, who now looked like a true man. They slept together another time, and a month later, Marina confessed to Vanya that she was late, unsure if she was truly pregnant. And Vanya, he was overjoyed. He couldn't believe how happy he was. Despite his mother's protests and tears, insisting that the child was not his, Vanya remained resolute. His mother eventually relented and began preparing for the wedding. Marinka gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. Vanya tenderly held and cared for his daughter, taking care of all her needs. Marinka, exhausted and in need of rest, would sometimes ask a neighbor to look after Sonia, while she went out to bars and restaurants. Vanya kept quiet and worried that Marinka might try to take their daughter away from him. However, as time passed, Marinka seemed to calm down. She stopped running around and Vanya thought things were getting better. He reassured his mother, but she remained skeptical. Regardless, Vanya's mother grew fond of little Sonika. Despite her doubts, she couldn't help but love such an angelic child. Whenever Vanya was working at night, his mother would take care of her beloved granddaughter, never leaving her alone. She believed that it's not the biological father, but the one who raises the child that truly matters. One day, Vanya returned home from work and found Marinka sitting with a suitcase in front of her. His heart sank, and she tearfully confessed, "Forgive me, Vanechka. I never loved you before, but now I do. I love you so much that it hurts. I'm leaving you. I'm going to be with him, but I'll make sure to take Sonechka with me." Vanya stared at her for a moment, lost in thought. After a while, he spoke calmly, "I won't allow you to take Sonia. It wouldn't be right to expose a child to that kind of environment. I'll figure things out on my own." Marinka's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean you won't give her away? Sonia is my daughter. I can't imagine life without her." Vanya slammed his fist on the table, causing one of its legs to break. "If you insist on staying here, then leave. I won't let you bring our daughter into the brothels." Although Marinka was taken aback by her husband's uncharacteristic outburst, she made one last attempt. Vanya glared at her with intensity, prompting her to flee to the streets and hop into a taxi without looking back. Vanya sat in silence for a while, pondering his next move. Eventually, he rose and headed over to his mother's house. The moment he opened the door, Sonechka rushed into his arms. "Daddy's home." Mother's instincts kicked in immediately, sensing that something was amiss. "Where's Marinka?" she asked urgently. "Sonechka, go pack your toys in your backpack. We'll be going home soon," she instructed her other child. Sonechka quickly ran off, leaving Vanya to face his mother. "Gone," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. His mother's worry turned to frustration. "Where did she go? And why? Why do I need to pry every word out of you?" Vanya sighed. "I don't know where she went exactly, but she left with her boyfriend." His mother sank down on a chair, her emotions flowing. "What boyfriend? And you're telling me so calmly? What about Sonechka?" "I didn't sell out Sonechka, if that's what you're asking. Will you help me?" Vanya pleaded. "Yes, of course, I'll help you. But how did it come to this?" his mother wondered. She said she never loved me, that she felt a burning sensation in her chest, he explained. I wish I knew where that burning sensation is coming from, his mother exclaimed. Just then, Sonechka entered the kitchen. Dad, I'm ready, she announced. Great. We're going home now, and tomorrow is Daddy's day off. We can go to the park and ride the merry-go-round, Vanya said, trying to bring some optimism back. Hooray! And what about Mom? Sonechka asked. Mom had to leave for work. She's on a business trip, Vanya's mother replied. Sonechka was initially disappointed, but quickly found a silver lining. So I can have Mom's ice cream. Vanya's mother, who had just wiped away her tears, couldn't help but laugh. You're quite clever, Samya. As they prepared to leave, Vanya's mother touched his arm, her concern evident. Vanya, what are you going to do? Are you going to get a divorce? She asked. Yes, Vanya replied firmly. I've had enough. You're right. Katusha asked about you again, his mother started. Mom, let's not go down that road, Vanya interrupted. You're right. I'll keep quiet, his mother acquiesced. Vanya placed Sonechka inside the car and took the driver's seat, driving out of the yard. As they journeyed, his mind wandered to thoughts of Katya. Katya was the daughter of a close friend of his mother's, who unfortunately passed away, leaving Katya alone at the age of 18. A rather unassuming and inconspicuous girl, she seemed to blend into the background. Some people just naturally preferred to remain in the shadows, perhaps due to insecurity or habit, and Katya was one of those individuals. Even as children, she never actively participated in boisterous games, always observing from the sidelines. Now, Vanya struggled to recall her face, although he knew that she was nowhere near as beautiful as Marinka. Vanya and Samya began their life together, although technically Vanya's mother, Alla Stepanovna, played a significant role in their support. Having recently retired, she had an abundance of spare time. At first, Samya would inquire about her own mother, but eventually those questions ceased. Vanya seemed to find solace and grow accustomed to his solitude. He left his job and started his own small business. Surprisingly, things began to prosper almost immediately. People recognized Ivan as an honest man who always kept his word and gladly sought out the services offered by his company. 2 years swiftly passed. One Sunday afternoon, Vanya and Sonechka ventured into the yard. Sonechka delightedly swung on the swings, while Vanya attempted some exercises on a makeshift rotating apparatus. It took him a moment to notice a woman with a child in her arms, watching him intently. Once he caught sight of her, he was completely taken aback. Standing before him was Marinka. She appeared frail, dressed in a peculiar manner, and clutching a little boy. Vanya, please forgive me. I can no longer wander. Andriushka is hungry, and we have been aimlessly wandering the streets for a month, too ashamed to face anyone. That's when Sonechka recognized the person standing in front of her. Mommy, she whispered, but instead of rushing into her arms, she grabbed her daddy's hand, her eyes filled with pleading. The morning was quiet outside, with no other people in sight, but Vanya noticed their neighbors peering at them from their windows. Some even opened their windows to listen more closely. Let's go inside the apartment, Vanya suggested, his voice laced with concern. There's no need to let people laugh at us. We can talk in there. Only after these words did Sonechka finally make her way to her mother. Marinka cried, showering Sonia with kisses and tight hugs. Once inside the apartment, Vanya spoke up. Feed the child and put him to bed, he instructed. Then we can talk. Marina proceeded to prepare porridge for Andrei, their 6-month-old baby. Vanya silently observed everything. When the little boy had finished eating and peacefully fallen asleep, Sonechka stayed with him while Marina joined Vanya in the kitchen. Sitting on a chair opposite Ivan, she began pouring out her heart. Here, my husband abandoned me, she confided. He promised me the world, but instead, he began drinking and then turned violent. and when Andrei was born, he simply disappeared. Just recently, he resurfaced with a new wife and kicked us out onto the street. Vanechka, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but please don't cast me aside. I'll be like your loyal dog. I'll do anything you say. I have nowhere else to go. My parents' apartment went to my brother, and you know he won't let me in. Vanya remained silent for an extended period before finally breaking the stillness. You'll stay in the small room for now. We'll figure things out from here. As time passed, subtly for some, Marinka gradually moved into the master bedroom. They continued their lives as before, but the family expanded. Andriushka grew up, now affectionately called Daddy by Vanya. Sonechka started school. Ivan's mother stayed away for an extended period, labeling her son a fool and Marinka a whore. By the time Sonechka entered 2nd grade, Ivan discovered that his wife had betrayed him once again. It hit him like a thunderclap. He had noticed her initial interest in the children wane over time, becoming nervous only when forced to deal with them. Vanya had remained silent, observant. Eventually, he returned home a couple of times when the children were away at the garden or school. Marinka claimed to be at home all day, but gritting his teeth, Vanya hired a private detective. Within a week, he possessed numerous pictures of Marinka with her lover. Vanya found himself in his yard as darkness enveloped the surroundings. The empty yard offered no solace. He hesitated to go home, unsure of what to do. Retrieving a bottle of whiskey from the trunk, he settled into the gazebo and began to drink, contemplating his life. "May I?" A sudden voice startled him. Before him stood a vaguely familiar young woman, Katya, who had harbored feelings for him. "Sit down. Why aren't you sleeping?" Vanya invited. "I can't sleep. I saw you through the window, so I came down. What are you drinking?" "Don't ask me." "Marinka, you shouldn't. You'll get drunk. Do something you'll regret." "Yeah, I won't. Why are you so sad?" They sat together in the gazebo with Katya until the early hours of the morning. Conversations were remembered, and thoughts were shared. Vanya felt a sense of ease, as if the air around them had become purer. Returning home, Vanya quietly laid down on the living room sofa, not wanting to disturb Marinka. He couldn't bring himself to look at her or hear her breathing. Marinka hadn't left the house for a whole week, and Vanya's absence during the nights had sobered her up a bit. She questioned him at length about where he was and what he was doing, but Vanya simply replied that he was working and avoided any arguments. However, he couldn't forget about Katya. There was something about her that Marinka didn't possess. Some genuine sincerity and kindness radiated from her. Several weeks later, when Vanya arrived home, Marinka was nowhere to be found. Sonechka realized what had happened and called her grandmother, who had taken Andrew from the garden. Vanya became filled with anger and frustration. He knew where Marinka had gone, but he didn't know what he should do. When their mother left, they went outside to see her off and coincidentally ran into Katya in the courtyard. She looked embarrassed and blushed, and before Vanya realized what he was saying, the words slipped out of his mouth. "Katya, why don't you come to the cafe with us right now?" Katya seemed taken aback, but then a defiant look crossed her face. "Sure, let's go," she said. The children jumped with joy, and at the cafe, Ivan ordered almost everything on the menu. Laughter filled the air as they enjoyed themselves. Vanya couldn't help but watch Katya closely. He observed how she interacted with Andrew, teaching him how to eat cake without dropping any crumbs, and answering Sonechka's questions. Overall, Katya had a wonderful domestic presence, and the most surprising realization for Vanya, that he hadn't noticed before, was how truly beautiful Katya was. While Marinka's beauty was flashy and bold, Katya possessed a gentle inner beauty. Whenever she looked at Vanya and smiled softly, he could see her radiance. Could it be that she still loved him? It seemed impossible, but she wasn't married. "I apologize for asking, Katya, but do you have a husband?" "I never had one," Katya replied. Vanya foolishly asked, Why? Embarrassed, Katya was pushed by Sonia, who scolded him, "Dad, you can't ask a woman such questions." Vanya realized his mistake and wanted to apologize, but it was too late as Katya had already responded, "You know why you ask." Ivan now felt embarrassed himself, not expecting such honesty from Katya. The evening ended abruptly, and when they returned home, Marinka was in the kitchen, looking guilty as she anticipated a confrontation. However, Ivan remained silent. He went into the room and quietly lay down on the sofa. For 3 days, Marinka was consumed by guilt, but on the 4th day, she began to fret. Ivan was at home, so she couldn't leave throughout the day. He observed everything, understood everything, and was intrigued to see what would happen next. There was no emotional reaction within him. It seemed as if everything had been burned away and forgotten. As he looked at the photos of Marinka with her lover, his eyes were opened. He had always known that it would come to this. He knew that Sonichka might not be his biological daughter. However, at that moment, it didn't matter. Both Sonichka and Andreyushka were his children, and he would never let them go. Ivan found himself thinking about Katya more and more. He wondered what would have happened if he had paid attention to her back then, and how their lives would have turned out. Perhaps they would have started a family together, as Ivan noticed Katya's affinity for taking care of children and his own love for them. As Ivan sat on the sofa, lost in his thoughts, his daughter Sonia came and sat beside him, seeking comfort. She told him how angry their mother was, yelling at them both. Ivan couldn't help but smile, realizing that Marinka must be frustrated because she couldn't spend time with her lover. "Don't worry, Sonichka," Ivan reassured his daughter affectionately. "It used to be so good when it was just you and me. Now it's different with Andrew since she's always yelling at him." Looking closely at his daughter, Ivan had a sudden realization. How had he never considered this before? Andrew, their son, was crying once again, and Ivan heard Marinka shouting at him. He went into the kitchen, picked up the boy, and calmed him down by telling him a story. Afterward, he quietly returned to the kitchen. Marinka hadn't noticed him yet. Ivan observed her as she poured some pills into her tea. He raised an eyebrow, stepping back in surprise. Then he pretended as if he had just come into the room. Marinka seemed pleased to see him. "Oh, Vanechka, I was about to follow you. Here, let's have a cup of tea. I have a headache today. Maybe tea will help." She offered him the mug, which he suspected contained those pills. Was she trying to poison him? No, surely she wouldn't go that far. Then what was she up to? It was more plausible that they were sleeping pills. As Marinka turned away to attend to the stove, Ivan discreetly poured his tea into a potted plant nearby. "Sorry, little flower," he whispered. "You must be hot." Marina looked at his mug with surprise. "I was very thirsty," he quickly excused himself. "Well, I'll go now. I need some rest." Marina cast a satisfied glance at him. Vanya lay in the darkness, listening intently to the activities unfolding in the kitchen. He heard Marina's phone ring, followed by her hushed and hurried conversation before she entered the room. "Vanya, Vanya," she called out, but he remained silent, feigning sleep. Marina left the room, and after a moment, he heard the gentle click of the front door closing. Vanya rose from the bed and made his way to the window. Marina was getting into a taxi. Well, that was it. He needed to swiftly proceed with his plans. With utmost caution, so as not to wake the children, Vanya gathered Marina's belongings. He carefully placed 2 suitcases and a bag by the landing, putting her passport on top. Hidden within the passport were the photos provided by the detective. Afterward, he returned to bed. Oddly enough, he fell asleep quickly. The sound of the doorbell jolted him awake. Vanya hastily got up and opened the door, only to find Marina standing there, her eyes filled with fear. "Vanya, I'll explain everything, I promise. It was a mistake, just a mistake. I love you so much," she pleaded. "Don't call and wake up the kids." Vanya retorted firmly. "And do me a favor, don't cross my path again." He closed the door, leaving Marina staring at it with a hollow terror in her eyes. Where would she go now? What should she do? She knew that Ivan's current calm and sluggish demeanor were merely temporary. She made the decision to give him time to calm down and miss her, and then attempt to reconcile. She dialed her lover's number. "Hello, my husband kicked me out." "I'll come to you," she said. "Are you crazy? Why would I want you here? My wife is returning in 2 days. Sort out your own problems," her lover replied, dismissing her. The phone let out a series of short beeps, perplexing Marina. Swearing his undying love for her, he had promised to be by her side always. But after 3 months of enduring an unbearable life in a rented room, Marina decided she had had enough. It was time to take matters into her own hands. No more forgiveness, no more waiting. Marina's brother, Vanya, had always barred her from his doorstep. Ever since their youth, he had harbored a grudge against Marina for persuading their grandmother to transfer the apartment to her, only to sell it secretly and squander the money. He had warned her not to come back, not to hope for anything. So Marina had resorted to borrowing money from her friends and renting a place of her own. The thought of finding a job never crossed her mind. Vanya had always forbidden Marina from working, seeing it as his duty to provide for the family. But now that the money had run out, it was time to return to the comfort of their family home. As Marina approached the house, she noticed that Vanya's car was not there. She tried to convince herself that it might be for the best. They could use this time to prepare something delicious, clean up the place which was surely covered in dust, and in the evening, Vanya would come back and apologize. She attempted to unlock the door, but the key didn't fit. This was unexpected. Could it be that Vanya had decided to change the lock? Anger started to well up inside Marina. No matter, as soon as she sorted things out, she would have a new lock installed. She started calling and knocking on the door, but no one answered. Finally, she heard a creak from the neighbor's door. "Marinka, what are you doing here?" the neighbor asked. "Where's Vanya? Do you know?" Marina inquired with desperation. "I do. He went to the seaside for a vacation," the neighbor responded. "The seaside?" Marina repeated, stunned. Marina was seething with anger, feeling a mix of worry and confusion. As she questioned the whereabouts of her ex-husband and their children, her neighbor abruptly slammed the door, leaving Marina in disbelief. Not once had she ever felt fondness for that woman, always feeling sorry for Vanya being tangled up with her. Marina remained rooted to the spot, trying to process the news of a new wife. Was he completely out of his mind? Well, she vowed to make him regret the day he was born once he returned. That's when a brilliant idea sparked in Marina's mind. She would report him to the police for child abduction. After all, they were officially divorced, and he had no right to take their children without her consent. But first, she needed to speak to his mother. Marina made her way to Vanya's mother's house and was met with a curt greeting at the door. "I need to talk to you," Marina implored. "There's nothing to talk about," his mother replied dismissively. "I intend to report Vanya for taking the kids without my knowledge," Marina stated firmly. Her words were met with a challenging response. "Well, then go ahead and call the police. I'll see how it plays out." Marina held her ground. "I will. Just watch me." Determined, she left Vanya's mother's house, ready to take the necessary steps to reclaim her children and demand the apology she deserved. Marina tightly gripped the phone, tears streaming down her face, as she explained how her husband had taken their children and his mother was aiding him. Ivan's mother observed her with curiosity before speaking up. "Well, why don't you come inside and wait for the police?" Marina couldn't comprehend why the woman remained so composed, but she reluctantly followed the suggestion and took a seat. Soon enough, the police arrived, and Marina immediately burst into tears. She had to physically pinch herself to suppress the sobs. The officers diligently recorded her statements before questioning Ivan's mother, Why are you assisting in hiding the children?" Ivan's mother replied calmly, "From whom? From her? No one is hiding them. My son Venya went on vacation with his wife and children. And this woman, his ex-wife, had her parental rights terminated 2 weeks ago." She handed over her documents, which the police thoroughly examined. They then turned back to Marina, who regarded the situation with bewildered eyes. "Why are you behaving this way, ma'am? You abandoned your children and now you're causing a scene," the police officers remarked. Marina stammered, I was deprived." The officers interrupted, "Well, we sent you several letters after you were evicted from the apartment to the address you used to live. You never responded. There is ample testimony from neighbors and even private investigators." Feeling frustrated, Marina exclaimed, "I won't let this go. They concocted the whole thing. They will be the ones begging for mercy." She then muttered, "How am I supposed to survive now?" Ivan's mother glared at her and retorted, "You deserve this, you ignorant fool. People work to make a living, something you clearly don't understand. Is that what you lacked? Vanya does everything for you." The police removed her from the apartment, cautioning her that if there were further incidents, they would take her to the station. Marina managed to free her arm from their grip and walked away, contemplating her next move. She needed a plan, a way to win Ivan back. Along her journey, she stopped at a pawn shop and exchanged the earrings Ivan had gifted her for some money. It would be enough to cover the cost of a room and some food. For now, she would wait. Every day, Marina visited Ivan's house, waiting in the yard for hours on end. Finally, after 3 hours of waiting, she spotted his car entering the yard. She quickly fixed her hair and stood up to greet him. Ivan was the first to step out of the car, assisting Katerina, whom Marina recognized from the neighborhood. Katya had changed so much, she almost didn't recognize her. She looked radiant. Then, Ivan's children emerged. Sonia immediately noticed Marina and took a step back, seeking refuge behind her father. Then, she tugged at Ivan's sleeve. "Dad, look," she whispered. Ivan turned around, his eyes narrowing with anger. He approached Marina, grabbed her arm, and forcefully pulled her behind a bush, shielding her from Andrew's view. Katya witnessed the exchange and instructed Sonia to quickly take her brother home. She then hurried after her husband. Ivan was seething with fury. Losing his temper was a rarity for him, but this provoked a strong reaction. "I specifically told you not to show your face," he seethed. "I'm here for the kids," Marina retorted. "You never cared about those children before. Now that things aren't going your way, you suddenly remember them." Ivan's grip on her hand tightened, causing her pain. Just as the tension escalated, Katya arrived, running to intervene. "Vanetka, let it go. Let's go," she pleaded, hoping to diffuse the situation. And then Marinka became overwhelmed with emotion. She quickly pulled her arm away from Vanya and launched herself at Katya, frantically grabbing at her hair and scratching her. Vanya struggled to separate them and pushed Marinka aside. Just then, the children rushed over to them, full of concern. They embraced Katya and all shouted, "Are you hurt? Are you okay?" They clamored to check on her. Katya tried to calm them down as she sat on the ground, saying, "No, my loves, it's all right, just a scratch." A trickle of blood ran down her cheek. Marina watched this scene with a burning hatred and then spoke up. "Sonachka, Andreyusha, come to me. I'm your mother, I've missed you." However, the children remained rooted in place, refusing to even glance at her. Marina raised her voice in frustration. "I said, quickly leave that woman's side and come to your mom. Do you hear me?" Sonia turned towards Marina and defiantly replied, "Go away. Don't touch our Katya, go away." Marina couldn't believe what she was hearing. She lashed out at her daughter. "What are you saying to your mom? You insolent girl. Haven't you had enough of me? And Andrew, go to your mom. He's not even your dad." Vanya reached his limit and intervened, unable to tolerate the situation any longer. He turned towards Marina and firmly stated, "You have 2 minutes. If you're still here in 2 minutes, I promise you'll regret it." Marina recoiled from his gaze, then took a step towards him and hissed, "You'll be sorry." In the evening, the entire family gathered in the kitchen, including Grandma, who hadn't seen them in a while. The grandchildren excitedly showered her with seashells and small presents they had bought from street vendors. Conversation steered clear of the day's events as Sonia and Andrew shared tales about the fascinating sea, its waves, and the warm sunshine. Grandma listened attentively, her face adorned with a warm smile. As darkness fell outside, indicating it was time to head home, a sudden commotion broke out on the street. Everyone rushed to the window and witnessed Ivan's car engulfed in flames. Neighbors quickly evacuated, and some even watched their own vehicles succumb to the fire. Amidst the chaos, Katia shouted for people to take action. One neighbor responded by expressing helplessness in saving anything, while another mentioned the presence of a camera installed a month ago pointing towards the cars. Meanwhile, Marinka, jubilant about recent events, popped open a bottle of champagne and began indulging, her smile widening. She saw this as just the beginning and contemplated her next move. However, her joy was interrupted by the doorbell ringing. Confused, she opened the door to find 2 police officers standing before her. Startled, Marinka asked what they wanted, to which they responded that they were there to take her in. Perplexed, she inquired about the reason for their visit. The officers informed her that burning cars was illegal and she was a suspect. Marinka denied any involvement, claiming that the car had set itself on fire. Puzzled, she questioned what was truly going on. Marinka stumbled, her heart pounding in her chest. This couldn't be happening. She couldn't end up in prison for something she didn't do, for being deceived and thrown out of her own home. But her pleas fell on deaf ears as no one listened to her desperate cries. When she tried to resist the policeman's grasp, another officer scratched her face with her nails. The handcuffs were placed on her wrists as they explained that her sentence would now be even longer. A year passed, and Kaja and Ivan welcomed their newborn daughter into the world. Sonia closely observed the tiny bundle when she was brought home from the hospital, and Andreyushka was there too, growing into his role as a big brother. "Now you're not the youngest anymore, which means you have to look after her and not spoil yourself," Sonia instructed him gently, her voice filled with warmth. "She's small and needs your protection and playfulness." Andreyushka pondered for a moment, torn between wanting to have fun and wanting to be a responsible big brother. Finally, he made up his mind and declared, "Okay, I'll protect her." Laughter filled the room as everyone shared in the joy of Andreyushka's sincere promise.